Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton. They got next, so let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome in everybody to the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I'm joined with my co-host, Alex Winton. And we got a lot of stuff that we got to get to today. A lot of Grizzlies news as well, with the Grizzlies hiring a new assistant coach, some trade rumors and stuff like that. But we're going to start today with the NBA playoffs because as the time we're recording this, we actually just got done watching Timberwolves Nuggets Game 7, with the Timberwolves moving on to the conference finals, going to be facing the Mavericks. And I'll say this. The playoffs as a whole this year have been very entertaining, but it was one of the more entertaining games I've watched this entire playoffs. Just the Timberwolves being down. I think they were down. I know they were down at least 20. I think a little bit even more than 20.
They were down 15 at half, and then they were down 20 early in the third.
Yeah, like they were down, I think it was like 58-38.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was not good. And early on, like Minnesota, it was really just their offense was not there. Rudy Gobert, I feel like, was a big part of that issue just because, they weren't really worried about him on offense at all. And it kind of allowed them to, they were sending a lot of double teams at Ant and everything like that. And basically they decided they were not going to let Ant beat them. Like, that's really what it felt like in that first half. And I think one of the signs of maturity that we did see from Anthony Edwards today was that when that happened, he passed the ball and he relied on his teammates. And he had 7 assists, led his team in assists. Even though he shot the ball horribly, he didn't shoot the ball well, but he made the big three late. He made a couple clutch plays on defense late. Jamal Murray had an incredible first half, but Anthony Edwards really did kind of lock him down a lot in that second half, especially the fourth quarter. So it's one of those things where it's like, even though he didn't have a good shooting game, a lot of people are going to come away from that game saying that Anthony Edwards still played well on all the other fronts. So it's like you can get over 6 for 24 is bad. It was bad for him most of the night. But like I said, he made the clutch one. And he played defense and he hustled the whole night. So, you can live with that because, he's not going to go 6 for 24 very often.
Yeah. That's the thing about the Ant thing is that you talk about 6 for 24, but if you watch the game, you want players as quote unquote empty the clip because you rather have a guy be 6 for 24 than a guy be like 2 for 8. That's part of we'll get to the Pacers in a second, but that's been my biggest criticism of Tyrese Halliburton, who I'm a fan of, but he'll be too passive at times. And where Ant did get a little bit of passive, I say in the first half, there were a couple times he passed up some mid-range jumpers and he tried to make, threw the ball to Gobert, which you don't need to do because again, offensively he wasn't doing anything really in the short roll. You don't want Gobert doing anything offensively. Now, granted, Gobert hit one of the craziest shots I've ever seen in my life with that baseline.
Okay.
Baseline yeah, we can talk about it, but I don't know how he hit that. But this is what I mean by, listen, y'all hear me on the pod all the time, right? I always say, basketball guys, you need a lot of luck to win a championship. That type of shot is the luck stuff because there's no way to describe how it happened. It just happened. Sometimes that means it's just your time. And that's what happened in Minnesota because they were down, like I said, they were down 15 at half. I think there was a stat that came out that every team in game 7s that were up 15 plus going into half were like 20-0. And then, the Wolves just came back, had a great third. Really got to give it to Jaden McDaniels because, again, been a big slander of Jaden McDaniels, not in the sense of his overall game. I just think offensively he's been so inconsistent. And so when you talk about a guy, how much you're paying him, you're paying him 100, I think 25, 26 million a year to be a guy that gives you consistent 15 to 20 points a night with all NBA defense, but he hasn't been able to do that. But these last 2 games he has had 23 tonight. Cat, obviously, you paying him like not a super max, but damn near. And so he stepped up. Like guys stepped up. Basically what happened was and we've seen it before. and your role players need to step up, and then your stars make the big plays. That's basically what happened. You had Nas Reed and guys make big plays, and then Ant made the big shots. He wasn't great if you look at his box score, but we've seen games, even with Ja Morant, when he played against Minnesota, he had a couple box scores that weren't great, but if you watch the game, he made the big plays. And that's really what it comes down to. It's about what can you do to make the big plays. If you watch the game, people would say Ant had a good game because he was able to turn this game around. In the second half, he was hitting big shots. Like we said, he had that 3 at the end of the third. Then he had that 3 dagger to go up, I think, from 7 to 10. I think he made like 92, 82. So you had type of shots. And then obviously some big stops. I think he had a steal, another block. I think 2 steals that led to dunks. Like big plays like that swung the momentum. And so, yeah, Nuggets really, you look at it, it's basically Jokic and Murray, the only 2 guys that had double digits. I'm looking at right now. Murray had 35, Jokic had 34. Nobody else had 10 points. Like, you're just not going to win that game. I'm surprised that they lost a little bit just because, again, I said there was levels to this. I did the whole time. I looked wrong. And I give Minnesota credit. You got to give Minnesota credit because, again, they went into there not only that time tonight, but they beat them 3 times in the series on their home floor. Like, that's not easy stuff with Minnesota. When I think Denver's only lost maybe 8 total home games in the last 2-3 years in the postseason. So you just gotta give Minnesota credit. So they deserve it. They look, congrats to them. This has been 20 years since the last time they made a conference finals. So yeah, I mean, you got to give them credit. I mean, that was a really good series. Really great game 7. Again, that was because for that, literally it's a tale of 2 halves. Like I always say, you've heard, everybody's heard the saying, but that literally was a tale of 2 halves. Like you thought the Nuggets were in control of this game, and then literally it flipped in the third quarter. And then
and I think that's the crazy thing is so often, especially over the last 2 years, anytime the Nuggets have had those leads in the postseason, they haven't blown those leads. Like that's just not what they do. Exactly. They just don't do that. So watching that game, seeing them go up by 20, not to say that the game was out of reach, but you're thinking okay, the Nuggets, they're up by 20, they're at home. The Timberwolves are probably going to make a push, but you think, okay, I mean, anytime you're up by 20 at home, you think they're going to win that game. And it's like the reverse of what happened to them in the first round series against the Lakers. That's really what it's like. It was like the complete opposite of that. And that was just ridiculous. And then that run that the Timberwolves went on to go up 10 late, it was just you could feel the air come out of that arena. Just it was so quiet. And it was to the point to where it was I think it was Mike Conley was at the free throw line, and they weren't even yelling. It was dead quiet. And then he actually missed the free throw. It probably threw him off. He's not used to that. Right? He's not used to you go into the free throw line in a playoff game and it's quiet. Now that's and on the second one they were louder, obviously, after you missed the first one. But it was just you could tell they were just stunned. Because I mean, I get it. I mean, you're up 20. You're at the game. If you're a Nuggets fan at that game, there's no way you think that. Because that's just not what they do. They haven't done it all season, at least not. And they definitely haven't done it in games that have mattered over the last couple of years. So that was really the most surprising thing to me. And then, like you said, it was really just the fact that the Nuggets couldn't get help really from anybody else. Michael Porter Jr. needed to have one of those big games tonight if they wanted to win. The Nuggets only putting up 90 points is incredible too, but that's just a testament to the Timberwolves defense. I mean, the Timberwolves defense was awesome. Karl-Anthony Towns, I thought he played really great defense as well, besides the fouling. But that's just, I mean, it's a playoff game too. Sometimes you're gonna foul. I get it. He's got to get better with that. But I mean, he still played 30 minutes.
Yeah, he found
exactly. But I mean, if you're in foul trouble and you still play 39 minutes, okay, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, they give you 6 of them for a reason. So I guess use it. If you come away with a win, nobody remembers that you have 5 fouls.
Yeah, Gobert had 6 and Daniels had 4. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah. So
yeah, they were in foul trouble the whole game. I mean, but I mean, Cat has really been in foul trouble the whole series too. But that's besides the point. But I think, I mean, that put back dunk that Cat had, that really was just that was a really big play in the game. And he made some clutch plays down the stretch that I think he really proved a lot. Even though he's, probably he's not the number 1 guy anymore on Minnesota. Obviously, that's Ant, I feel like. But, I mean, Cat, is one of the best second options in the NBA still. Like if you consider him the second option, which most people would. So but he just hasn't shown it in the playoffs consistently.
Yeah,
And
consistent.
I think tonight was a big step for him towards that. And he's got an opportunity to continue to prove that going forward in these next couple, like against the Western Conference Finals facing the Mavericks. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the other game 7 we had today, Knicks Pacers. That was the early game, and honestly, it was really just like the Pacers just had an offensive barrage. I mean, all 5 starters were in double figures. All 5 starters actually not only just in double figures, all had 17 plus. Halliburton wasn't. I feel like the number one issue I've had with Halliburton is if you're the number one player, you cannot go into a playoff game and take like 6 or 7 shots. Like he did that a couple times this series. I'm like, dude, you are one of the best shooters in the NBA. You like, and there are times that you'll see him where he would drive and he passed out of it, but he didn't do that really in this game as much. Obviously, he still made the right play when he needed to, but led the team in scoring, took 17 shots, 12 threes, was really like you said, like letting it fly. Like there is no reason in a game like that for the best player on the team to not take the majority of the shots. Like that's just how it is, and I think he really proved that today. So it was good for him to have a big game. On the Knicks side of things, it was just at that point of the game when they had as many injuries they had. Obviously, OG Anunoby tried to play, but you could tell that he was nowhere near 80%. You know what I mean? It was very clear that he should not have been out there. That's why he played 4 or 5 minutes early on. It was very clear that he was not there. Josh Hart obviously played, but he's dealing with injuries and stuff as well. And then Jalen Brunson fractures his hand in the third quarter. They're already missing Julius Randle.
Mr. Robinson.
Donovan. Robinson. Like the list goes on and on for them. So like they had the Grizzlies regular season curse hit them in the playoffs. It really felt like or really in the second half of the season. The curse the Grizzlies had in the first half. Like so I do feel bad for the Knicks just overall, just because you hate to see like this is one of the best seasons they've had in recent memory. Obviously, in recent memory, I mean they got the 2 seed.
It's been a decade. A decade since they did it. Yeah.
So like and you hate to say because it's really kind of like a what if type of season. Because not to say that they were going to beat Boston, maybe they weren't, but it's like you got to think. I mean, if Jalen Brunson doesn't get hurt, if Josh Hart's healthy, if OG is healthy, if Robinson's healthy, or even if just 2 or 3 of those players are healthy and the other guys are still out, like how much different would the series have been? So I do see that part, but I also think it's partly like Tom Thibodeau. I know that's his thing is that he plays guys big minutes, but I think you could kind of see that was wearing down on the guys, and I think like when you have these guys continue to get hurt like near the end of the season in the playoffs, it's just because I feel like he's just put so much pressure on them the whole season, and you can have injuries that are kind of cumulative where it's like all of the stress that you've put on your body for the past 8-9 months playing 40 minutes a game, it can all just kind of hit you at once. And I kind of feel like that's what happened to the Knicks is the accumulation of all those minutes throughout the season really hurt them at the end when they had to continue to play in those big minutes in the playoffs. And I think maybe other teams were a little bit more rested, and then other teams obviously didn't have the same injury issues.
Yeah, I say to start off with the Knicks, I think it's 50-50. I think half of it is like depending on the injury, there are certain things where it builds up and it's a buildup of basically over minutes. But I will say there's certain injuries where a lot of these guys were already injury prone and like they were whether already going to get hurt or it's a fluky injury. Like Brunson, no amount of minutes was going to make Brunson could have fractured his hand literally, any play at any time, even if he played like 32 minutes compared to 40. And then Mitchell Robinson's already had injury history before. with his ankles and his foot. Then Bogdanovich, he got hurt before. Like some of these injuries are minutes, you could say, like for example, like OG and Anunoby hamstring, but then you could point to him again, another guy that's always been hurt and in and out the lineup. So some of this, I think, it's a mixture of all that, where some of these guys have already been hurt before, and then some of it is just playing too many minutes. But again, they're probably some of these guys are already playing so many minutes because of the injuries they already had. So you just got to kind of look at it like that. But ultimately, sometimes it's not your year. Like I always say, I'm gonna continue to keep saying it. Luck is a big part of this. Everybody's either it's hard to go deep in the playoffs without any luck, whether it's a shot going in, matchup, injury, happening. That's happening in the Knicks. Like they literally just got hit with the injury bug at the wrong time. And I mean, again, I said it on Twitter when it happened because I saw shout out to my the homie SJ, who's a Dallas fan. She was talking about it. She's like, I've never seen a team basically like just pass away, like basically like the Knicks did. And I was just like, I put the little Grizzlies, like this meme where basically it's like first time, like they're not used to it. Like Grizzlies fans is like looking at this like we're used to this because people forget that we lost like 3 starters in like a span of like a week. So like that's basically what happened to the Knicks, but in like 2 games, 3 games. So it happens. Again, this was their best season in a decade. I mean, obviously they had last year, but they weren't. They were a higher seed, but even then. Nobody really. I mean, Miami was.
Yeah, they weren't the 2 seed though. They weren't the 2 seed.
They weren't the 2 seed. Yeah, they weren't the 2 seed, but they were. Miami was on a big. Miami.
They got a game 7. They had a game 7 in Madison Square Garden for the first time since the 90s.
Yeah. So
that's big stuff. That's big stuff.
It's crazy. And so you thinking you're gonna make your first conference finals. I think since probably like late 90s would have been the first time they would have made it the first conference finals if they would have won. So it's just tough. And it's funny how this series acted up but came up 10 years later because literally that's what happened 10 years ago when it was the Knicks and the Pacers won that series to go to the conference finals. So shout out to the Pacers in that. Again, listen, like we talked about with Halliburton, 17 shots, empty in the clip. I'm glad. I'm happy, right? 26 points. This team is great when he's great. You can't be. I say this is the thing I kept saying the whole playoff. He gets CP3 syndrome, where CP3 would have a tendency, Chris Paul where he would just basically, you look at the box score and he'd be efficient. He'd have some assists. His points would be low, but you couldn't really say he played bad off the box score. But if you watch the game, you could tell he's way too passive. He's being too conservative, and that ended up costing your team more than it ended up helping your team. And that's what basically Halliburton has had a tendency of doing, where he gets too passive, too into moving the ball, where he needs to take the shots. I bet him taking a shot is better than getting somebody open, depending on who it is. Sometimes that's just how it is. And so he played with aggression today. And again, they were just up from the jump, and then they never really looked back. Usually in game 7s, this is not the normal. Usually game 7s is more like what we saw in the Minnesota and Denver game. Oh, it's Minnesota Denver game. Minnesota Denver game, where basically you're basically shooting nothing but bricks. Like it's a brick fest basically, because teams are so nervous and tight. That's usually what happens. You usually shooting low percentages. Like, compare. I'm looking at the Knicks score. They won 130-109, and Minnesota and Denver's 98-90. Like this is usually not your typical game 7. Yeah, it's not your typical game 7, but Indiana is a high-powered offense, so I'm not necessarily surprised about it too much. But I mean, you got to give them credit. Again, I know people are gonna look at Indiana and be like, okay, they were a 6 seed. They literally played against an injured team the last 2 rounds every time. But like I always say, you got to play who's in front of you. Like they can't help that. In the first round, Giannis got hurt, and then Dame got hurt. They can't help that in the second round. They played a team where they were already hurt, and then you got to play who's in front of you. It's part of the game. Like these injuries are part of the game. It's going to continue to be part of the game. It's not nothing that goes away. It happens every run for some team, whether even if they don't win the championship. We seen it with some Grizzly team when they made the conference finals. Played second round. They had Kevin Durant. Westbrook was out that round. If Westbrook plays, it might change the series. Who knows? But it's easier to play against them when they only had KD, no Harden. Like it happens. Like we've seen it happen before. So you can't, you got to give credit to the Pacers, because we've seen teams who played against injured teams and not be able to win the games. So you got to give them credit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that we've seen it go both ways. I think that obviously you can still have that as maybe, I don't know, want to call it like an asterisk to say like it doesn't count, but obviously that goes into it, and people will remember, okay, they made it, but teams were injured. As you should. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's like all you can do is play who's in front of you. And now that the Pacers are in a position to where I mean, obviously going into the conference finals, which is what I want to get to next, is talk about like some predictions for the conference finals as well. Now that we actually know what the matchups are going to be, but the Pacers going into this conference finals against the Celtics, obviously they're going to be the underdogs, but I think they're in a good position because we know that the Celtics have a tendency to blow at least one game at home of the first two, right?
Yeah,
So
they're gonna trick off a game. I don't know where, but they're gonna trick off one.
like it happens every season, and it's usually game two. Usually they win
right
game one, lose game two. That's just been kind of the pattern that's happened both of their series this year, right? I think with the Pacers though, they've been really good at home. Like if you look at the past couple series, they've been awesome at home. That crowd is hungry. The Pacers have always had one of the best fan bases, I feel like, in terms of crowd support, going back to when they had Reggie Miller and Rick Smits and guys like that in the '90s. So it's a basketball state, right? So that crowd's going to be rocking, and we all know role players play better at home. And the Pacers are basically a team of role players. Like that's basically what they get. It's kind of Halliburton and Siakam, and then a bunch of really good role players. And I feel like if Boston does do what they usually do and lose one of those first two, I'm not saying that they'll necessarily lose the series just because if they lose game two. I think the Celtics will end up winning the series. I think they're the better team, but the Pacers are in a good position still just because they're playing with house money, right?
Yeah.
Nobody really expected them to be there this year. All the pressure in the series is on the Celtics. The Celtics are the ones that have all these people that are like, they haven't been able to get it done in the past. When is Jason Tatum going to win a ring? Yeah, they're championship or bust. Now, obviously, Indiana, you want to win. They go. Every team goes into the season wanting to win the championship. But the Indiana Pacers were not championship or bust coming into the season, right?
No.
Like, they are in a good position, and I just feel like those teams that have nothing to lose, that's dangerous. It's dangerous. Like I said, I still think the Celtics are the better team overall. We'll see what's going on with Kristaps Porzingis, and if he can come back, I think if he comes back and plays, that could be like a really big help for them as well. Obviously, just to deal with Pascal Siakam or Miles Turner, who have both been having some pretty good games for the Pacers. So I think having Porzingis out there would be helpful. But I mean, Al Horford played great for the Celtics down the stretch in that Cavs series. But the Celtics also, same thing we talked about. Cavs had a lot of injuries as well. I think they would have won that series regardless, but same thing. They had to play who was in front of them. So now that we're in the conference finals, I just think it's really interesting to see like how these teams got here. Celtics is like, I mean, you could really say that 3 out of these 4 teams are not teams most people expected to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about the teams, man. It's like I didn't expect Minnesota and Indiana. I expected the other 2 teams. So, but I mean, I am here for it. Again, like I said it on Twitter. They said it on Twitter. This is the if I remember the stat correctly, if I remember the stat correctly, basically this is the first time in a 6-year span, because this is the first time in the 6-year span where we basically won't have a repeat champion since like the 70s or the 80s. Like it's never happened. This parity era, this is a newer era, because usually most people are used to teams repeating at least, getting back to back at least. But this would be the 6th straight year where we have a different champion. And I think they even said on a broadcast, no champion, like repeat champion in the last 6 years has made it past the second round. So like this is just a new, different age, that I hope people are used to. Because again, this is not something that's normal usually, but this is going to be the new norm. But I mean, again, with the Eastern Conference at least, Boston, I expect them to get it done. I mean, again, I've said it before a long time ago. This kind of feels like the year kind of feel a little bit different. Now, obviously, they got their moments. They still do Boston things. But the thing is, they just hope that those moments where they are inconsistent doesn't really show up and really rear their ugly head. And then on top of that, you hope Porzingis is healthy, because I think he's the X factor. If he's healthy, they probably win the whole thing. If not, they don't. Like, it's that simple. You don't get Porzingis and not think, okay, he literally unlocks everything for them for what they do both ends of the floor. So I think they'll still win this series again. I could see them tricking off a game at home. Thing about that though is Indiana, at least, if I'm not mistaken, they won the game 7 today, obviously, but I think this might have been their first road win all playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's going to be a big thing for them. Can they translate that on the road? Obviously, I won't say they're a young team, but they're an inexperienced team, and they play more up tempo, more so than half court, even though they can play in the half court. So I think that plays a factor, especially when you're playing a Boston team who basically can switch. I think that might be an issue for them, where I feel like this team basically Boston can switch 1 through 4 essentially, so they're not really giving up anything matchup wise. So I think that could really hurt the Pacers if they're not really able to if Tyree's going to be passive and stuff like that. But I mean, I can't remember. I can't remember last time the Pacers and the Celtics played each other. It might have been a minute. It might be last decade. I can't remember, but it's a lot of these matchups just feel like older matchups just because it's like at least we haven't seen it in a while. But yeah, I expect Boston to take care of business. I'd be surprised if this is 6 games. Probably, I'm expecting 4 or 5. That's no disrespect to Indiana. No disrespect to Indiana, but it's just I can get that. Because I'm just like, bro, like especially it depends on the Porzingis stuff. Like you said, they said apparently Porzingis might miss the first 2 games, but they're not gonna rush him back because again, they didn't win 64 games for no reason. Like they're talented. Like that top 6 is elite. Top 6, 7 is elite. So, but again, like you said, they have a tendency of tricking off games. So we'll see if they trick off a game, maybe 2. Who knows? Maybe we're sleeping on the Pacers a little bit. I don't know. I might be. If I am, I'm wrong. So be it. But I expect Boston to be locked in because especially after knowing Denver's out, I personally think Boston feels better about playing against Minnesota than they did Denver. And so now that Minnesota's in, basically they should feel like they're the favorite. Like they should feel good. I'm pretty sure they feel good right now.
Oh, so Celtics are definitely the favorite now.
Yeah.
But people thought if it was going to be Celtics Nuggets, maybe it would be the Nuggets in that series. Yeah. But I think now, I mean, I would say it's probably Celtics and then either the Timberwolves or the Mavericks. But Pacers are definitely of all the teams, if you were looking at the betting odds, I haven't looked at them, but I know for a fact the Pacers are.
Oh, yeah, they're last. No question. No question.
They're
no
the worst.
Yeah, no question. No question.
But so I'm with you on that. And then on the Western Conference side, I don't know. I think the Timberwolves are going to be favored, especially just because of their defense and because, it's going to be interesting to see what they do defensively because, I mean, they're going to put Jaden McDaniels on Luka. We know that, right? There's no question about that. Ant said immediately after the game tonight that he was going to be guarding Kyrie. So that's going to be cool. That's going to be really, some awesome matchups to watch. But I think it's really going to come down to, like a lot of playoff series, it's going to come down to the role players, and I think it's going to come down to Karl-Anthony Towns. Because I think Karl-Anthony Towns, he's going to have a chance to really assert himself in this series. Obviously, not to say that, Derek Lively is a bad player or something like that, but, he's a younger player. I think if he plays, if he can try to, get on the inside and score and get in the post a little bit, I think that could be a really big X factor for them, especially considering how he just played tonight and really getting on the glass and controlling the glass and everything like that. He's going to be having to deal with Daniel Gafford, I guess, as well too. But I still think that's a matchup that Cat should be able to, that's a matchup I think Cat will like. You know what I mean? So I think he could really be the X factor for the Timberwolves, kind of like he was in Game 7. And then for the Mavs, I think it's going to continue to be P.J. Washington. And the same thing, Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford. Those guys are going to have to really lock in on the defensive end, getting rebounds and everything, doing the dirty work. And then, I mean, it's taken a couple P.J. Washington 30-point games for the Mavs to get this far. Or 25-point games, however many it was. I think it was 29 and 31 in one of those games. So, he's had some pretty crazy games. And I think he's going to have to continue that because they're going to need a third person to step up. Kind of what we saw the Nuggets didn't have in Game 7. They had their 2 stars go for 30+, and nobody else go over 10. So, they're going to need a PJ Washington or somebody like that, a Tim Hardaway Jr. to come in and give them 10, 15 points at times, like Josh Green, so all those people, all those people you can go down the list. There's a lot of people that could do it, but they're going to have those role players really step up. That I feel like the Nuggets just didn't have that kind of in that game 7, even though they did have it at other times throughout the series. But they're going to have those role players step up, and that's really going to be the difference in the series.
Yeah, and I will say, big thing is Kyrie got to step up too. Kyrie probably had his worst series after game 1. He probably had his worst playoff series he's ever had in terms of a scoring standpoint. I think he had 2-3 games where he's single digits. Playmaking was there, but the offense was not there. And that's the thing you would think if Kyrie, because if anybody would probably assume before the playoffs that you need Kyrie and Luka to be going insanely crazy to even have a chance, and then one of the role players go off, and then you usually win. You wouldn't think Kyrie having that series, they would win that series, even because OKC is very talented. So you would like if OKC, you would have thought if you looked at the box, you're like, how did they win that series? But PJ Washington got stepped up, and I think this is a series where Kyrie has to step it back up, and I think he understands that too. He has to get into. He can't just be a second half guy anymore, because there was times where he had bad games and then he'd have a second half run to kind of save his game in terms of, how he'd be talked about. So he's really got to step it up. He can't have those games where he only has 9 points, 10 points. You definitely going to need more scoring, because no disrespect to PJ Washington, but it might not be his series this time, especially with Minnesota's defense. So you're going to need Kyrie to really figure out how he's going to be able to score. Obviously, they said Ant's going to be the matchup. That'll be interesting to see. Because I know Ant obviously guard Jamal Murray. No disrespect to Jamal Murray, but Kyrie's a different type of player. Obviously got in my opinion, the best handle ever. So you got to really figure out how you're going to guard that. It's probably a little bit different. Because even though Ant has the physicality, advantage, again, Kyrie's just a wizard. He's an anomaly, so you got to figure that out. And obviously with Luka's going to be Luka. I think McDaniels is obviously going to make it tough. But the thing about Luka is now, obviously he's had these injuries, but it seems like at least the last 2 games he started to play better. In terms of, so he might be getting healthier. So you got to take that into account. But yeah, it's gonna be about role players and co-stars. That's usually the name of the game. Who's gonna be better between Kat and Kyrie, and then after that, is Naz Reid gonna be better than PJ Washington? Is Derek Lively and Gafford can that front court really neutralize Minnesota's front court? Like, it's gonna be that, but I expect the series to go 6 or 7. I don't know who I got. I said on Twitter, actually, I said Wolves in 7 maybe, or Mavs in 6. That's how it's kind of feeling, but I could be very wrong. I don't know. I expect a good series. It's gonna be very hard.
I do think this is probably gonna be. I mean, besides the Nuggets Timberwolves, I mean, so far I'd say Nuggets Timberwolves or Knicks 76ers have been the best series so far, I think. But this is going to have a chance to be the best series. And one thing I'm really happy about in general is, because like we talked about a couple weeks ago, as much as I do have respect for the older players that are still going, and KD and LeBron and Steph and all those guys, it is awesome to see that in the conference finals we have 4 teams where the best player on every team is under the age of 27. Like, you go Ant, Jason Tatum, Halliburton, all under 27. Luka is only 25. It's like, so all these teams are being led by a best player that's under the age.
The future is now, old man. That's exactly what that means.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that means.
Exactly, 100%.
The future is now.
And that also means one of those guys is going to, like, we are going to see somebody have like kind of a legacy defining ring this year, right? Because like any of these people, it's somebody. It's going to be somebody new again, which is why I do really enjoy this like kind of new era that we're kind of in right now, where there's a lot of parity, and every year you don't really know who is going to be at the top of this, who's going to be at the top, who's going to win. Just because I feel like we did have that time, especially like 2016, 2017, like, with the Cavs and the Warriors. And then when the Warriors had KD, you kind of was like, okay, they're going to at least be in the finals every year. You might not have known who was going to win, but you were like, okay, this is basically going to be in the finals every year, right? And you can't say that anymore. And I think that's good for the game. It's good that you were seeing smaller market teams, like a team like Minnesota, get there, like a team like Indiana. Yeah, like both of them. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't really consider like Dallas or Boston small markets. But on the other side, I definitely think that's a good thing. Just it's always good to see small market teams make it and have like small market stars as well. I think it's really good for the game in general.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is like it looks like I think shout out my boy Steve. He said it earlier. If you looked at they look like the actual playoff bracket, it looks like an NFL bracket because NFL has so much parity where it's like you didn't expect this. Like I think if I'm looking at it right now, the bracket you got a 1 seed, a 6 seed, 3 seed, and a 5 seed. Nobody necessarily expected that. So I think I probably expected if I remember correctly, I probably had 1 and a 2, and then I think 5 and the 2. So yeah, it's different. But again, like I said, the future is now. Like that's basically what it is. Obviously, again for me, in terms of Grizzly related, a lot of this is just telling me I need. I'm gonna keep saying it till it happens, until I see it. I need Zach Kleiman to do his job first. That's all I'm gonna say. I need Zach Kleiman to do his job. I keep watching these games. It's hard for me not to think, okay, they shouldn't be feeling. I almost have a way, but they should. Like not only the Grizzlies, but this offseason in particular, like a lot of teams are going to be feeling like they're that close. Like, because no disrespect to Minnesota, but there's certain teams that matched up better with Minnesota, and they probably feeling like, okay, Minnesota's here. Why can't we be there? And we might be better equipped to be there than Minnesota. There's a couple teams that could feel that way. I think the Grizzlies could feel that way. Obviously, some people disagree, but like, I just feel like all of this is telling me the Grizzlies need to lock in because it's close. Because again, 6 years, like we talking about parity, teams that won back to back, and you're seeing young teams like Ants 22. Obviously, they're not a young team. That team is old. I know people call that team old or young. Ants young. Everybody else like 27, 28. Ant McDaniels is young, but everybody else like 28, 29, 30. And like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these teams are older, but their stars are younger. Their top stars are younger. But again, we have the younger stars. And I think if anything, you look at the teams around, you probably got, I'm gonna say the most outside of Boston, but most teams only got 2 or 3 or 2 guys for sure. I'd argue that the Grizzlies got 3, and then maybe a 4th, depending on how you feel about Mr. Gigi Jackson, depending on how you feel merged. But I think the Grizzlies should feel okay, like looking at this. But it's gonna be interesting, man. Like this parity era is gonna be different. But again, like you said, the game is better for it. Like I feel pretty good about it. Like
100%.
Yeah, like I've been asking for this for a while. Like I've been saying, like parity, like because everybody tried to tell me like parity wouldn't work in today's league. And I'm like, bro, the league is different. Like the stars are different, the marketing is different, the talent is more. This is the most talent they've had in the league forever. Like we're looking at teams, or like no disrespect to Ant, but like I don't know. Some people might consider him a top 5 player now or whatever. But there's certain players you look at. Nobody in this outside of maybe arguably Luka, you would consider like a top 3 consensus top 3 player, arguably, right? And like usually you got somebody like that are in that stamp. A lot of these guys, like you said, are still making their legacy, so it could help them move up to that status. But like that's why I think it's a little bit different. And I mean, again, I'm here for it. Like it makes I almost say make teams feel like they're closer because certain teams are closer than what they are. Like some teams are very close to it, but like you could feel like okay, we got a chance as long as we have like a top 15 player in the league. You and your roster's built, very well, you might have a chance of winning a championship. Like that's how probably a lot of teams feel now. So, and I think it's better for the game that way because especially now you got that along with the new CBA, teams are going to not have to be smarter about certain moves and believe in their core. So, I mean, I think all this is good for the game. And again, I think it's a lot different. People are not used to what's going on right now because it's a new age, but I think that's the whole point. Like, you'll get used to it like as it continues to go on. Because again, it'd be different if somebody had a legacy, but like you said, nobody does. Not say nobody doesn't have a legacy, but they're building their legacies. Whereas, Jokic was kind of not stamped, but he was still building his legacy, but he was a champion, right? Like the older guys like LeBron, 4 championships, Steph, 4 championships. Like you already know their legacy is kind of cemented. It was just going to add on. These guys are still building theirs. So, and it's good to see. Like I said, they're all young. All them 27 and younger or 27 younger. Like, come on, man. That's great. This is great.
Yeah, it's going to be really awesome. I'm going to be really excited to watch the conference finals. I think I'd probably say Timberwolves and Celtics. are going to be the teams that come out, and then we'll see what happens from there. But like I said, I think that Timberwolves Mavs series is going to be electric, and I think the Mavs, the stuff they did at the trade deadline, bringing in Gafford, bringing in PJ Washington, all of that just worked really well. And there's sometimes where that just happens and it clicks and it works perfectly.
Yep.
And that's just kind of how it's been for them. But kind of like moving on from that, we did want to talk about the Grizzlies do have a new assistant coaching hire, and it is going to be none other than Noah LaRoche. If you don't know who Noah LaRoche is, he's somebody who has been an NBA trainer for a long time, doing research and stuff and looking at, he's worked with Paul George, Jalen Green, he's worked with Diana Taurasi. So he's worked with a lot of great players on both the men's and women's side. With his integrity hoops, he worked with Russell Westbrook a lot as well. Russell Westbrook has credited him with a lot of his development. And Paul George and Jalen Green talked. There's a clip out there on Twitter somewhere. We can try to link it in the description of this video as well. But there's a clip of Paul George and Jalen Green talking about working with him, and Paul George kind of explained how he helped him slow the game down a little bit for him and helped him like fine tune a lot of his moves and stuff like that. And he's going to be over player development. And I mean, I'll say this. I mean, if you got, if it's somebody that coached Paul George, I want him locked in the room with Gigi Jackson the whole summer. Let's get it going. We got new Paul George in the making. Go ahead and lock in with him. Gigi Jackson needs to be the first person he calls, and Vince Williams Jr. too. They can both call him, but Gigi Jackson needs to be the first person on his list because I think that could just be awesome for his development. Obviously, I don't think he has a ton of NBA experience per se, like with teams. A lot of his stuff has been private stuff. I know he worked with the Thunder for a little bit as well, but most of his stuff has been as a trainer. But I think that could still be good just because, I mean, it's kind of like a new approach on stuff as well. But obviously he's been around the game. He's worked with teams. He's worked with college teams and stuff like that in the past too. So he has a resume to where he's been around the block a couple times. And anybody who's worked out with NBA players and NBA players, like if Paul George credits you with improving his game, I'm going to listen to what you have to say, right? So I think it could be a really good hire for them, especially since he is also going to be, over player development and stuff like that.
Yeah, no question. And also he's had, I think if I'm not mistaken, a shout out to Adam Pike, who does a lot of Grizzly film work. He's got to shout out to Adam Pike. He's great with the film work. I think he talked about it because I think he talked about Noah LaRoche a while ago because he like he said, he worked with college teams and he has ran his own offense. And so he was more excited about that perspective of it. See if that will implement some of his philosophy to the offense, which it might. But again, I think a lot of it, more so than anything, is player development. I think the biggest thing, especially when you hire him as a head of player development, that's really the big key. I think a big thing for the Grizzlies is, people were talking about Jenkins changing the staff. Like I remember that being talked about. A lot of it, people assume certain things, and in terms of what does that mean? People getting fired, contracts expiring. Most people don't really know, but again, they are changing their staff around, regardless of whether it's firing or team, player, or, coaches getting, just their contracts not being, up, renewed up. Like they are changing staff around. Obviously, they feel like they need to, and I feel like they need to too. I mean, again, if anything that can help you improve your roster in any incremental way is going to help. Again, I think the goal, obviously, with Noah LaRoche, I'm not saying he's going to be this type of guy, but we've seen it. You're hoping that he can be the Grizzlies' Phil Handy in the sense of where Phil Handy has been a player development guy in terms of his own time. He's had training, but he's also been an assistant coach for teams that were championship teams, obviously with the Lakers, with LeBron, and then he was on Kawhi's, the Raptors team, and then I think he's with LA again before that, or Cleveland before that, with LeBron. So, he's been credited with helping guys like Kawhi and LeBron and Kyrie and even also all the names that he, whoever's on those teams, he helped their game develop. And now you got a guy like that on the Grizzlies, where guys need development. Obviously, you need Gigi and Vince, really, those are the main quote unquote development guys. But I think he can also help Ja Morant's game and Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson games too. Even though they're kind of already set in terms, what they are to a certain extent as players, but they can still get better in little ways. Like if he can help Bane be a better creator somehow, or be a better ISO player, or Ja Morant be a better ISO player, or Jaren be better with his reads, like little stuff like that will add value overall to the team, especially. But I really think Gigi and Vince are the main guys because, again, realistically speaking, if we're talking about young guys in the rotation, those should be your only real two, like your main rotation, those should be your only two real quote unquote young guys in the rotation. And they need development. Gigi's a 2nd-year player, Vince is a 3rd-year player. Like they're still not close to what they are as players, possibly, especially Gigi. So I think if you can get him and you prioritize Gigi like you're supposed to, and he gets, the reps with, whatever, the first unit and all that, and obviously get rid of, LaRoche, I think he could, that really could be a thing for his game. Like, again, I said it a long time ago with Zaire Williams when in Summer League, I was talking about, like, you talking about the Paul George stuff. I remember he had a great game in Summer League, and I was like, look, I posted, I said Zaire Williams was like Paul George. Like, I always used to joke like that, but now I'm really hopeful that this time around I'm not just saying it just to say it, and it actually comes true to some extent, right?
Yeah,
I'm not.
Hopefully, I do think that Gigi, out of anybody, if you look around the league, not to say, if you look at the body type, the fact that he's
talent,
6'8", 6'9", probably still growing. You know what I mean? And he has shown off some of the handles and some of the on-ball stuff. And he has shown the step-back threes and all that kind of stuff. I think you could definitely see that. And I think bringing in somebody who's worked with not only him, but also, like I said, working with Diana Taurasi, who is one of the best scorers, men's or women's basketball ever, just in general.
Yeah, we're working with really good scores. Yeah, good players.
So it's like he's worked with guys and women that are pure scorers, and I think that's going to help him, and I think it's going to help Gigi get that into his game, because that's going to be a lot of his role. As he's going to be the guy who is mostly finishing the plays. He's going to be the guy who's taking the threes. He's going to be like, if he can have those moves that he has, like go-to moves, like you watch Paul George, he has a couple go-to moves you're going to see him go to all the time. And those are the moves that I think Noah LaRoche really helped him with, whether it's like with the step back, whether it's crossover moves and drives to the basket, and how to get your steps right when you're having those drives to the baskets, utilizing Euro steps, all the other stuff that Gigi has shown that he can do. I think he can just take it to that next level. So I think the player development side is the part that I'm most excited about. I do think that because I saw what you said with the Grizzlies film. Also, like you said, shout out Adam Pike. I saw his thread about it as well. And a lot of the philosophies and stuff that they talked about seems similar to what Taylor Jenkins does, except it seemed like he didn't really run as many sets and pick and rolls and stuff like that, which the Grizzlies still don't do like a ton of pick and roll necessarily either. But even though I think they should do more. That's besides the point.
Of course,
but,
of course.
but that's besides the point. But it was a lot more free flowing offense, backdoor cuts, constant motion, all that kind of stuff that I feel like the Grizzlies do a lot of that. So I think it'll probably fit pretty well. I will say I hope Anthony Carter is still going to be sticking around on the staff. I know we don't know exactly what that's going to be. But they haven't come out and said anything about it, because I know that he's part of the player development team, and Gigi Jackson has said that he's been a big part of his development. But obviously, there's going to be more than one assistant coach on the staff. This could even be a thing to where maybe he ends up getting promoted and he is a higher level assistant coach. You know what I mean? So don't know necessarily exactly what it's going to mean for that, but I do hope he is still going to be on the staff going into the next season.
Yeah, that's the hope. You hope that he can be on the staff next season. And again, the Grizzlies could make this easier if they came out and said stuff, but Grizzlies love to be.
They're not going to though.
Yeah, they're not going to. The Grizzlies love to do this stuff where they just want to be so vague about everything. And I'm just like, listen, I get it, but it just makes things funny. But yeah, no, I do think this is obviously a good hire. I'm not really worried about it. Again, like I said with the Gigi thing, you hope that it helps his game out. Again, I hope it helps everybody game out, because again, they're always going to bring in, especially now, they're going to bring in a rookie. I would expect that. And you hope that because they're going to bring in new players every year is what it is. They're not going to keep the same 15 players every year. It's just not going to happen. You're not that lucky. But, so you're going to get new players in there. And just hopefully these players can come in and add little wrinkles to their games. And hopefully they could add, like you said, with the offense, could add wrinkles to that. So, I think, again, it'd be hard for me to not see this hire be good. Obviously, people talk about assistant coaches and don't really know their roles. But, we can kind of get a gauge of what his role could be. And so hopefully, again, we see the added value going into next year because, again, everything matters, especially for this team going into this next season and seasons to come because, again, it's a pivotal time where they feel like a championship window has, quote unquote, opened. So any little thing anything of value, like any little thing that can increase your chances of getting to that goal should help, and especially with Gigi Jackson because, again, like you said, with his role next year, he even said it. I posted a clip a while ago when he was doing an interview with Chandler Parsons, Lou Williams. He said he envisions his role being like an MPJ role, and I think Jarrett saw it. Jarrett liked it, if I'm not mistaken, so he saw it real quickly. And so, like, that's obviously the role they envision him being. And again, like you said, if he can do the MPJ stuff and then be able to do the stuff where he has a go-to move, where he's attacking the closeout or where he might have to create in a pinch, right? Like where, it's like 10 seconds on the shot clock, he's got to create real quick. If he can get to something like that in his bag or like an ISO move, that can add some value. So, little stuff like that I think is going to be big for him, especially if he's prioritizing. He somehow is in the starting lineup next year. You're going to you have to be basically playoff, not necessarily off the ball like that, just catch and shoot, but basically how Bane was. Like we saw how Bane grew into his stardom where, catch and shoot. And then as you got a little bit more on the ball reps as time went on. So, and obviously I think Gigi's a better talent, not a better player, but a better talent, like more natural talent, like gifted scorer. Like Gigi just came out averaging like 15 points his rookie year or 14, 15 points his rookie year. And that was like consistent regardless of the roster, whether he had Bane or Jarrett next to him or Vince next to him, or he had a bunch of guys that were back in rotation. He was scoring regardless. And he was able to fit in regardless of the group. So, now with the team that's probably going to be with Ja, because he didn't get to play a game with Ja. We'll talk about that later, but he didn't get to play a game with Ja. Imagine him playing with Ja. We saw Zaire Williams be a useful player with Ja Morant, and Zaire Williams never did what Gigi Jackson just did. Or Vince. Imagine what they're gonna do with Ja. I'm just saying, life gonna be easy. So I'm hoping that LaRoche can make his game or life easier for him and just everybody in general. So I'm excited to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, definitely. So we're obviously gonna keep track and see what players and what people are saying about Coach LaRoche and everything once he gets. I'm assuming he's going to be going to summer league and everything, so maybe we'll get to hear more about him from that standpoint. Just because, if he's player development, no question he's not going to be at summer league. That's where all the development happens. So I'd assume he's going to be there. We're probably going to hear more about him there, and then maybe get to hear from, because like we said, if with Anthony Carter, the only reason we necessarily know that Anthony Carter or how good Anthony Carter is at his job or whatever is because of what players have said and because of what Gigi Jackson said. So I think it's going to be something similar with that, because it's not necessarily defined exactly what he's going to be doing as an assistant coach, like what he's going to be doing on the bench, but we know what he's going to be doing as a player development coach, and that's going to be the main thing. Last thing I did want to talk about is trade rumors and everything like that, because we got a good one this week. It came out that the Grizzlies should be a dark horse candidate for Donovan Mitchell, which I thought that was interesting. I think that's a smokescreen. I don't think that's real. I just don't really see it, just because they already have Bane. And we've talked about it in the past, they have a lot of guards. They still probably need more wings and more, like definitely a center, 100% before they get any more guards. So I do think if there's anybody from the Cavs that they would go after, it would be Jarrett Allen, like you did have in your poll that you posted that had a lot of people split about whether you would rather have Jarrett Allen or Mikal Bridges. I saw you posted that as well. So, but I think Jarrett Allen would be a good option if it was somebody from the Cavs. I just don't see Donovan Mitchell as somebody who's gonna come to Memphis. And what trade would you be able to make there? Would that include the pick? I wouldn't want it to include the pick. You know, even though the pick is the 9th pick now, I don't know if I really wanted to include that pick in there because, I mean, you already have Bane, you already have Ja. Are you going to run a lineup with Ja, Donovan Mitchell, and Desmond Bane? You know, that does leave you a little bit undersized. You can try to make that up by playing Jarrett at the 4 and then having a bigger center, but I do feel like that I just feel like you would rather have like Vince or Gigi in that spot to play that kind of catch and shoot role instead of another guy who's gonna be a ball dominant person. I think they already have a lot of people that are ball dominant as well. So I just don't know how exactly it would work, and then financially it would be crazy. So that's why I kind of just feel like that was something that was just kind of thrown out there randomly, and I don't think it's something that the Grizzlies are probably can. I mean, maybe they did ask about it or something they have considered.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's something that we'll see happen this offseason.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. People got to really read it and break it down because they said the Lakers, Nets, and Miami Heat are interested in acquiring Mitchell if he becomes available. But they're basically saying the Rockets and the Grizzlies are monitoring the situation. That doesn't mean they are necessarily interested. That just kind of means they're checking in, essentially. Like, it's not the same thing. Well, those 3 teams are really trying to get him, whereas the other 2 teams are monitoring to see. Because, again, ultimately, if he doesn't resign, he going to put a list out of teams and be like, hey, like, you know, I want to go here, here, and here. Now, he might not get that wish, but, like, more times than not, you're going to go to the team that you want to go to or going to get to, you know, you want to go to, usually depending on how your contract is. Dame is a different case because he wanted to go to Miami, but he had like 4 or 5 years on his deal, so like that was not gonna work. But like with Mitchell, I think he only has a year left or so. So, you know, he probably could go where he wants to go. But like you said, I don't think it's a real big thing. Again, fit wise, it just doesn't make sense unless you get rid of Bane. I mean, okay, you get rid of Bane, but again, that means okay, you're probably giving up a lot of assets to get Mitchell, and we just seen a lot of teams give up assets to get a guy, and then that puts you in an even worse situation, especially for a team where they need to necessarily, in my opinion, they don't need more star level players. They need more role players, which is why I brought up Jarrett Allen, not because of that only, but I mean, again, they even said it about the Cavs, like his future with Cleveland's up in the air because, you know, people talked about he didn't play through that rib injury, and they're trying to say that the fan or the organization and the people didn't like how he didn't play through the rib injury, even though a rib injury is like very serious, like he could have made it worse. Like there's a lot of stuff that was going around, but basically sounds like the Cavs are going to make a lot of moves. They don't even know they're going to keep their same coach. So, and then you have add that in with apparently Garland wanting to leave and Mitchell stays. So essentially somebody's leaving. They're not going to keep that same roster. They're not going to keep the same core 4. They're not going to keep the same core of Allen, Mobley, Mitchell, Garland. It's really, and Mobley's going to stay. So then it's about who's going to leave out of the other 3. I think Allen's for sure leaving. And then it's like, okay, who's going to leave out of Mitchell and Garland? So that's why I feel like Allen is gettable because a lot of teams are going to want him. And I mean, I put the poll up because, you know, people talked about getting Mikal Bridges, the Grizzlies trying to get Mikal Bridges. And obviously there hasn't been anything about Jarrett Allen going to the Grizzlies or, you know, him interested or them being interested. But I will say this, Desmond Bane and Jarrett Allen have the same agent, as we have seen before. Agencies play a big part in this. OG Anunoby had the same agent, or his agent had a connection to the Knicks front office, and where did he go? To New York, and now he's probably gonna resign with her. All that stuff plays a part in this. So
it's all about, like, it's just in life in general. A lot of stuff is about who you know, man.
Who you know.
All exactly. About connections. It's all about connections. So anytime you have a connection like that, I think, I mean, we've seen it countless times. Even, I mean, obviously mostly with like clutch, and people always talk about like with LeBron and AD and stuff like that. Like, you always see stuff happen where if you're in the same agency, or both of your, if you, maybe you don't even have the same agent, but both of your agents work for the same agency, whatever it is. You're very likely to have a good connection. And even if you don't have a connection with that player, maybe both of your agents have a connection, or they have a connection to somebody who works in somebody's front office, or and it goes on and on from there. So I do think that is something to monitor, the fact they have the same agent. Because it might be something that maybe is like a smaller thing most of the time, but it's not something that's just completely out of the question. Because I mean, we've seen it happen time and time again, where if you do have those connections, it's very likely you can see them do that. And I think Jarrett Allen, I think he's a good player. I'm not sure exactly what the package would be to get him. I think that's going to be the main thing is what package are you really willing to give up to get Jarrett Allen? But I mean, I think he's a good player, and the Grizzlies need a center. I think he would work well as, the screen setter and hitting the short roll. He's been a solid passer out of the short roll at times as well. Seen him do that. So and he's a lob threat, and lob threats usually work pretty well with Ja. So I think it could definitely work.
Yeah, listen, Parker. Shout out to Parker Fleming. He said it. I know you said you don't want to give a lottery pick. Listen, if they talking about getting Jarrett Allen, I will throw in. I think he said it. I would throw in that ninth for Jarrett Allen because personally, you could. Here's what I could see happening. Obviously, this is just again. I hate playing hypotheticals, but I sound like Sean Coleman. Shout out to Sean. He be doing this on this pod with the Grizzlies trades and stuff like that, especially with draft stuff. I'm getting my Sean Coleman back real quick. Hypothetically, you could see the Grizzlies being like, "Hey, we're gonna give you 9, Santi Aldama, Luke Kennard, maybe an extra first or 2, or probably an extra first, and you give us Jarrett Allen, and then you give us your 20th pick because that's what the Cleveland Cavaliers have. So basically, you could get Jarrett Allen the 20th pick. You still be able to bring in a back end rookie. You get to bring in, you get to do all that, and you not lose draft. I mean, you lose draft capital, but you still get to bring in a rookie scale contract, and then you bring in Jarrett Allen. So that's not like
I would be more okay with it in that situation because you still get the first round pick back. If you get a first round pick back, even if it's this year or next year too, or if it's like you swap picks and they're kind of moving up, and then you also add other assets, maybe like you said, another pick, some other players for Jarrett Allen, and then you're still picking at 20, I'd be more okay with that just because I do think they would like to bring in at least one rookie this year. Because
and we still got the second rounder too.
You do have the second rounder as well, like obviously. But I think it's one of those things where, especially when you have a lottery pick and where the Grizzlies are at, when you can get a player that is a top 10, top 15 player in his class, and then you have him on that rookie deal that can, it just the flexibility that allows for the rest of the roster.
Yeah, for sure. No question.
That's why Gigi and Vince having the deals they have now is so important. But I mean, this year is one of those years where, I mean, obviously the 20th pick isn't even going to get paid as much as the 9th pick, right? This offers even more flexibility. And in compared to years past, I think the difference between the 9th pick and 20th pick isn't as large as it would be in a lot of drafts.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. You got to think like we don't know who's going to be available at that pick, and then you also have to factor in what the Grizzlies like because they might feel that the 9th pick you could get a good player at 20, right? We don't know how they feel. Because everybody assumes they want Donovan Clingan or people saying Zach Edey, like they want a big clearly or somebody, but they might not like they might not be high on either of them guys. They might be like, hey, let's get Jarrett Allen, and if we can somehow get a pick, or they might give away that first rounder and still bring in a second. Like we don't know how they feel about their draft. I'm just saying Jarrett Allen from the simple fact of you gotta feel a need. You're not going to use all your assets, and like you said, you got GG and Vince, and so that's the thing that changes the equation for me. That's why I put the poll up, because if they didn't have GG and Vince, I would be more inclined to get McCall. But the fact that you got those guys, it allows you to have more flexibility to add to your core guys because you essentially need 7, or we really need essentially 8 guys to play in the playoffs. I think the Grizzlies have right now. Well, you got to for sure. I say 5 or 6. I think 5 really under contract. GG and Vince are obviously to be determined, but I feel confident about those guys being able to play in the playoffs. I've seen Zaire Williams. Again, I no disrespect to Zaire Williams and Roddy. I've seen Zaire Williams and David Roddy have moments in the play. Not moments, but like I've seen those guys be okay in certain points in the game. And I think GG and Vince are much better players. I'll be very hard pressed to think that going to be.
That's true. I mean, it's not even a think. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So when you have that, so now that you have that type of flexibility, I think that's kind of the thing that you can afford to add to Jarrett Allen, where if you don't touch any of your top 7 in the contract and you can get Jarrett Allen, that adds to your 8, or he'd be your 8th guy. And you're telling me a top 8 of Ja, Jaren Bain, Vince, Gigi, Smart, BC, and Jarrett Allen's not like one of the better top 8s in the league. I mean, you probably do that because again, I get you want to add flexibility to a rookie contract, but that's the thing with the Grizzlies. Not to say they're gonna be good every year in terms of drafting. We've seen that clearly the last 2 years, but they know how to draft in the second round. Obviously, they got Gigi and Vince in the second round, and they know how to draft pretty reasonably well. So I would be okay to give up the 9th because especially in this draft where you might be able to find a player as good as somebody at 9, I would be okay with them giving a 9th, especially because again, this team is different. It'd be different if you were a rebuilding team, but this team's trying to win a championship next year, and I feel pretty confident in what Jarrett Allen had. He was an all-star for a reason. He was 16 and he's a walk-in basically 14 and 10 and like two assists.
Yeah, and I think he would play well with Jaren. He's a good defender, good rim protector.
Yeah, because Jaren can shoot. Yeah. It's not like Mobley where Mobley's not a shooter. Jaren can play with him, and then you're talking about a guy who's a live threat. Like your offense would be dynamic, like not dynamic, but he can score. Like he can shoot the little floater. He can make decisions at the short roll. Like he's not bad. I know people talking about his height, and he's like 6'9-ish, 6'10-ish, but he's got like a 7'6" wingspan. We seen him guard Giannis, and we seen him guard bigs. Like it's not like he's like 6'6". He's not Xavier Tillman. You know what I mean? So
and I mean, and numbers are good too, and that's one of the more important things for the Grizzlies because they need someone who gets a lot of boards.
Yeah, last thing, no rebounds, no rings. A lot of these teams, I think teams that are out rebounded in the playoffs this year, I think are like 55 and like 12, like in terms of win and loss. So usually no rebounds, no rings. So you need more rebounds. We've been said the Grizzlies need more guys that can rebound. So, and he rebounds. He averaged like 10 on. So I just think it's a no-brainer. But again, I don't think we're the only team looking for Jarrett Allen. Everybody's going to be going for him. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Because again, this offseason is going to be crazy. There's going to be a lot of movement. I don't know what's going to happen. I just hope that the Grizzlies somehow can take advantage of the movement like they did last year, or not last year, but like we saw teams take advantage of team players getting moved and swooping in and getting players. So hopefully the Grizzlies can be one of those teams.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, I think it's going to be an awesome offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of movement, not just with the Grizzlies, but with teams in general. But like I always say, I appreciate everybody who listened to this week's episode of the Next Gen Podcast here at the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. Another great week. Very excited about everything going on with the NBA playoffs. Got tons of more Grizzlies news coming up. Summer League is still only, about 2 months away now. So we're going to have even more stuff like that. Draft is only like a month away. So we got plenty of stuff to talk about on the Grizzlies side, and then continuing to follow the NBA playoffs. We're going to have a new champion. Loving everything that's going on in the league. But we will see y'all on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.